Hello and welcome to the Neckbeard Experience. We've got another edition of Wolfbeard. Will Calamity be able to withstand the advances of a steampunk werewolf? Let's find out in this edition of Wolfbeard and the Bionic Heartbreaker. So strap on your goggles, tighten up your corsets, and here we go. Today's tale continues the epic saga of our favorite lupine Neckbeard and his quest to court Milady. When last we left off, Wolfbeard had attempted to beach himself in a mud puddle on the forest trail behind the apartment complex after hearing me say how much I disliked the gross comments and how I didn't want to be around him anymore. A lesser beard may have given up and decided I was a dumb hoe that just wanted to find a Chad to hop on like the others. But Wolfbeard was a persistent one, and he had no intentions of giving up the hunt without his prize. Some time had passed, and I did not speak to or see Miss Piggy for a while. She had kind of broken my trust in her with the last Wolfbeard incident, and I needed some time to cool off. It also didn't help that my friend Lilith had definitely not hit it off with Miss Piggy. Right from the get-go, she said something like,
I'm really getting some bad vibes off that girl. Be careful.
Something I should have listened to about her, but I had to find it out the hard way later. At the time, I thought it was just a little bit of rivalry. Miss Piggy definitely wasn't warm toward Lilith. She seemed to feel as though the fact that we had been friends longer, since kindergarten, automatically made her my sole and dearest best friend, and that my attempts to rekindle our old friendship was proof of this. However, Lilith and I are very close, and it's plain for anyone to see. I can't tell you the amount of times that people have actually mistaken us for literal sisters. Since this clearly challenged Miss Piggy's perceived status, she was on her guard from the start. What's most fascinating to me, however, was that though Miss Piggy turned a willful blind eye toward Wolfbeard's seeming apparent infatuation with me, but in the sight of the same behaviors directed toward Lilith, it burned her up. Over the course of the evening we had been over there, every time Wolfbeard would make a gross comment directed toward Lilith, instead of directing her anger at Wolfbeard, Piggy would shoot daggers into Lilith from across the room. Generally, Lilith is a really nice person. She's hilarious and mischievous and will battle to the literal death for your honor if she cares for you. But if you get on the girl's bad side, you will think that Satan himself has personally targeted you. And Lilith really didn't like Miss Piggy. It was only out of her respect for me that she promised to restrain herself and to continue to make an effort to be cordial. But let's just say that the diplomacy was shaky. So, it was after this dry spell for a little over a week with no communication since the puddle incident that I suddenly got a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but it was a local area code, and I was expecting some calls that day, so I answered. But when the familiar husky voice on the other end of the line met my ears, I nearly hung up on the spot. It was Wolfbeard. Restraining my shock and anger at him calling me, despite me having never given him my number, I allowed him to speak for a moment.
Hi, Calamity. Can I talk to you for a moment?
Wolfbeard, how did you get my number?
I questioned as calmly as I could manage.
Oh, Miss Piggy gave it to me. I needed to talk to you so I could apologize.
I was suspicious, but surprised nonetheless, so I allowed him to continue.
I've reflected on my behavior a lot lately, and I realize I've treated you very badly. I really like you a lot, and I don't want to destroy our friendship. Would you please accept my apology and allow me to start over? I really want things to be good between Miss Piggy's friends and me.
He sounded genuinely sincere, and I was truly caught off guard. Of all of my experience with Neckbeards, I've never known owning up to their bad behavior and apologizing to be within their realm of understanding. And I still really did want to make things good between us, especially if Miss Piggy was truly set on marrying him, and if he was going to actually make a change and make an effort. I decided to give him a chance. Over the weeks that followed, he did actually make a change in his behavior. He had finally stopped making gross comments, and he had stopped trying to touch me as frequently. Mind you, he still had boundary issues, and he loomed too close, and he still had a fear of deodorant, but things were much better. At least for a while. See, once I made the mistake of expressing an above-average interest in something in Wolfbeard's presence. That said thing became his whole life. Said thing was a small band or group of performers. They were called the Steam-Powered Giraffe. They have a fun, timey vaudeville sound to their music, and they stick to this whole steampunk robotic theme. All the band members and performers, they dress up in intricate steampunk robot or mad scientist style costume, and they play in character. In between songs, they have little skits in character, and they interact with the audience. It's super fun because they highly encourage the audience to participate, as in, they encourage them to create their own in-universe characters and to show up to the event in costume and play along. It was a really fun and unique experience, and I was already an avid cosplayer. It really appealed to me. The topic came up during a group meeting. I had reluctantly agreed to go despite knowing Wolfbeard would be there, because several other friends I didn't get to see often was going to be there. Both are super dear friends to me still to this day. The first was Doe. You guessed it, another D&D moniker. She had met Miss Piggy shortly after I moved away. She was friends with her through middle school, but she began to distance herself a bit when Miss Piggy met Wolfbeard. However, it seemed that she too had an interest in rekindling an old friendship, thus her appearance at the lunch meetup. Doe would also have the misfortune of later becoming Miss Piggy's roommate, but that's a whole different story, and perhaps I can convince her to share her own stories about that. The other girl joining was Valor. She had no previous connections to Miss Piggy or Wolfbeard. She's someone I met and befriended online. I later learned that she was also a college student in the same state. Our schedules made it really hard to hang out. So when I learned that we were both free, I invited her to join the group outing. I thought it would be safe enough, given Wolfbeard's recent attempt at adjusting his behavior and the sheer number of people in our group. Let's just say that although Wolfbeard stayed true to his word, he found entirely new ways to make the whole room full of women uncomfortable. With the exception of Miss Piggy, of course. After the initial greetings, where Wolfbeard tried to force a stinking hug on each one of the female guests in the group, he came upon Valor for the first time. Her saving grace was she was already in a long-term relationship with her then girlfriend, now fiancé. I think you realize that since this new milady was not only taken, but also taken by another milady, meant that she would be much more work to be convinced of his charms. So he spared her the more aggressive courting in favor of the other damsels in need of saving in the group. As I'm sure one can imagine by now, Wolfbeard was not an easy specimen to attempt having a conversation around. He had a thing with needing to not only participate in every conversational topic that arose, but to domineer it, even if he had to make up some ridiculous story to do so. One of the ladies shared a story saying something like,
"It was so cool. This one time we met Elijah Wood at the Space Needle restaurant, and he was nice enough to let me get a quick picture on my way out."
Better one-up that.
Who could forget the time when I ran into Morgan Freeman at Barnes & Noble? The time that really, actually, truly happened, and we spoke for over an hour. I taught Mr. Freeman a whole new stance on philosophy, and in thanks, he swore he'd never forget me.
I expressed myself by saying something like,
I would love to try singing and songwriting as a hobby.
oh, you better believe Wolfbeard had a story.
I was offered a contract for Universal Records for my heavenly voice, but it wasn't my dream, so I turned them down.
I could go on and on for hours about this story, but this is already getting long, and I haven't even started the main events. Wolfbeard is the truest example of a pathological liar that I have ever, and to this day, have ever met. I suppose trying to convince me that he was a literal werewolf should have been a warning sign, but I digress. He could weave these insanely intricate stories and do it completely impromptu, and they weren't short little blurbs. He crafted a story that was 5 or plus minutes long, and he could do so naturally as one breathes. I struggle just lying well enough to not spoil surprises to my friends, so I can't even imagine the process he had going on in his brain. Well, after dealing with Wolfbeard butting into our conversation for the last 30 minutes, Doe, Valor, and I shifted our body language a tad, and we formed a bit of a circle, effectively closing Wolfbeard off. Before beginning a new topic we assumed that he wouldn't know anything about. that being the small band I mentioned earlier. The three of us were really having fun with it. We decided to make our own steampunk robot costumes for the upcoming concert. We then talked about the band a little more, and we agreed on a mutual favorite robot.
That has to be the spine.
Ooh, the tall silver and black robot with the big battle spines jutting out of his back?
He's in that swanky, roaring 20s inspired group. He has this super sexy deep voice.
He plays that exasperated straight man to the group of otherwise goofy and hyperactive characters. That's a trope I live for.
Sensing the miladies taking an interest in another male, even an entirely fictional android one, and that was just a stage act, was unacceptable. He must have thought,
I need to move with haste before I lose my ladies to those wicked robot overlords.
You see, I was foolish in assuming that he wouldn't know anything about the band. I had been posting about them occasionally on my various social media accounts because I was excited about the upcoming concert. And should I really have expected Wolfbeard to not be stalking every account I owned, especially the ones that weren't strictly private? Oh no, he knew exactly who they were, and apparently he dug through every piece of media he could get his hands on and attempted to woo me with his knowledge. So, you better believe that he jutted into the conversation right at that very moment, breaking out his handy-dandy fake effeminate voice once more.
Oh, that spine is just so sexy.
He barked loudly from across the table, snapping his fingers in a zigzag motion, thus attracting looks from the surrounding tables. He then straightened his back up and brought a hand to his chest, gripping an invisible tie in an attempt to mimic the spine's signature pose, turning his head slightly to the right, striking an eerie grin, and pulling his golf hat lower, trying to cast a shadow over his eyes, similarly to how Spine's fedora did. Yeah, the Spine legitimate wore a fedora. But believe it or not, when you get a well-fitted one with a wide enough brim that doesn't make you look like a fat head with a baby hat, and you pair it with a masterfully tailored suit and vest, rather than repulse, it actually does magical things. But that pitiful golf hat and ill-fitted trench coat, it had the opposite effect. Not to mention his charming grin, it made the whole picture look quite deranged. If it wasn't bad enough, he then switched from the effeminate voice to as deep a voice as he can force himself, trying his best to mimic the robot's smooth voice and mannerisms. I don't really like to use the word cringy to describe things, but there is really no other way to describe the immense discomfort that this absurd behavior gave us. What's worse is that he continued to talk in this voice for the rest of the meal, as well as every time I saw him for the next few weeks, and he also didn't stop mimicking the Spine's body posture and mannerisms. I guess being a werewolf wasn't cool enough for him anymore, because now he wanted to identify as an android. The moment that he insinuated that he'd like to go to the concert and chaperone the lovely miladies, we quickly changed the topic, and shortly after, we finished the lunch and fled. A few days later, I wound back up at Miss Piggy's apartment to hang out with her and Doe. Doe and I got to chatting about the progress on our costumes. I'm a bit of a seamstress, and I love making crazy costumes. For my robot, I did this Victorian bustle skirt. You know, the ones that make women look like they have massive rears. That's because of all the ruffles and the literal pillow that you have tied around your butt. It was knee length in the front, and it was floor length in the back. It was a huge effort, and it cost me way more than I wanted to spend in materials. But it was coming along nicely, and it would be ready by the time of the show. I was exhausted from working on it. I just barely had enough time to balance it between classes. Well, little did Doe and I know, Wolfbeard had been lurking in the back bedroom. We had been under the impression that he was napping, but I guess he was just laying there in the dark listening to us chatting, because no sooner did I finish asking Doe how hers was going, Wolfbeard appeared in the living room and answered in her place, as if the question had been for him.
I'd love to do something Phantom of the Opera style. My robot is dark and brooding, along with having the most beautiful singing voice. He also plays the organ skillfully. He was supposed to be in the band originally, but his broken heart made him malfunction too frequently, so he was stored away in the attic.
He finished dramatically, still using that stupid attempt of a deep voice, mind you. Miss Piggy clapped her hand at her heart and sighed at him sadly. But Doe and I, we just gave each other a, "Can you believe this crap?" Look, feeling particularly adventurous that day, I ventured to interact.
That's a lovely backstory for your character, Wolfbeard. But theoretically, costuming for something like that will probably take a while. Are you sure you have enough time to sew it?
I asked, raising an eyebrow at the idea. It made me think of him squeezing in front of the sewing machine, and then once it's snagged, he would fling it off the table in a fit of werewolf rage.
Oh, well, I was hoping you'd actually make it for me, since you're so good at sewing.
He responded without missing a beat.
You can take my measurements now if you like, and the fabric store should be open till 9 tonight, so you should have the time to get the materials.
I sat silent and blinking for a moment. So this freaking boob wanted me to not only spend hours slaving over making a costume for him, even when I wasn't done with my own. And to top it off, he wanted me to pay for it out of my own pocket. Doe's eyes were the size of dinner plates, and her mouth was hanging ajar in shock. I had to take a stabilizing breath to remain calm before responding.
I'm sorry, Wolfbeard, but I can't make your costume for you. I'm not even done with my own yet, and I certainly wouldn't have time for another, let alone something that complicated. Plus, I really can't afford that.
His body sagged and his face drooped in sadness. He was legitimately upset that I turned him down. Then, as sadly as he could muster, as if trying to guilt me into changing my mind, he continued.
That's all right, Calamity. I understand. I'll make it myself then. I am a world-class tailor in my own right, after all.
I wanted to scream, "Then why did you ask me to make it for you in the first place?" But I knew he was just lying again, so I held it in. More time passed, and suddenly, it was just days before the concert. Doe, unfortunately, wasn't going to be able to make it, due to work and school, and robots were never really Lilith's thing. But Valor and I, we were hyped and ready to go. The band was doing 2 shows, one on Friday and one on Saturday. Valor and I opted for the Saturday showing, mainly because that was the only day that the band was going to be doing meet and greets, plus photos, and we bought that package. I was happily finishing the last details of my costume when I got a text on my phone. Looking down, I realized it was Wolfbeard, who still had my number, sadly. "Thank you, Miss Piggy," he informed me.
I got some time off of work. I bought some tickets for the show. I can't wait to see you and Valor there.
My heart turned to lead. He sent another message after that.
See you Friday, winky face.
Suddenly, my heart somersaulted back upwards. I had never made any social media post about which day I was going, and he had assumed the wrong day. With a smile plastered on my face, I pulled out all my fake sympathy, and I responded,
Oh, we'll have fun at the show, but I'm gonna be there on Saturday. I have tickets for the meet and greet, so Valor and I won't be going on Friday.
There was a brief moment of silence before he responded again.
Oh, the meet and greet is on Friday. I just saw that they changed it on their Facebook. You better go buy a Friday ticket before they run out.
I wanted to beat my head on the wall. This lying fool was at it again. I looked down at my tickets, and it clearly stated Saturday. And for good measure, I checked the band's Facebook page. No post announcing a day change. I was feeling a little aggravated at Wolfbeard's attempt to deceive me, so I shot back.
My meet and greet tickets say Saturday, and there's no such post.
The post was just there. They must have taken it down.
Wolfbeard quickly fired back, seemingly not prepared for me to see through his hastily thought out lie. I thought the shame of being cornered in a lie would be enough to deter him for a while, but once again, I underestimated the determination of this bionic wolf. Saturday rolled around, and Valor and I had a blast. We got into our costumes, and we met up with some folks for dinner before the show. The place was sort of a geek-themed tavern. It was full of other concert attendees in costume, so we really didn't stand out. All in all, it was a fantastic evening. Things were amazing until we arrived at the venue. The meet and greet was happening before the show, and we had to stand in a special line to get there early to take photos and then proceed to our seats. Valor and I were fairly far up in line, and we started to chat with some nice people when I suddenly felt a large, moist hand grip my shoulder from behind. I nearly screamed before turning around, only to see none other than Wolfbeard. He was standing there in his wolf tee, fingerless gloves, and the infamous golf hat. He had a huge grin plastered on his face. I was shocked and horrified to see him there. The weight in my stomach dropped even further when he proceeded to pick up those dumb mimicking gestures and poorly attempting the voice again, this being in the company of our new friends nonetheless.
It's great to see you here, Calamity. I decided to buy a ticket for Saturday as well, 'cause I really wanted a photo with the band.
Yeah, sure. It's totally got nothing to do with making sure you got here on the same day as me. Despite having already bought the tickets for a different night, the fact that he was badly mimicking a band member in front of countless fans of said band, who could clearly tell what he was doing, just made it exponentially worse. Trying to keep him from continuing, I changed the subject.
So, where's your costume, Wolfbeard? I thought you were a world-class tailor.
His gaze dropped to the street below, his mind clearly buzzing to make up some ridiculous grand story, and he certainly didn't disappoint. I kid you not, guys. Valor can attest to this. He looked me dead in the eyes and said,
I had nearly completed my masterpiece when the most horrible thing happened. I was using my mother's old sewing machine, and on the last seam, the machine broke, and it caught fire. It destroyed my entire costume, and I simply didn't have the time to craft up another one.
Like, dude, really? How is it easier to literally craft up some fairy tale about how your sewing machine spontaneously combusted than just tell the truth that you don't actually know how to sew? I would have had way more respect for that, and might have even encouraged you. But instead, we're fed a wildly woven fantasy, and we're expected to believe it? To this day, now whenever my friends and I procrastinate on something, and the other ask,
So, how's your project coming along?
we answer by saying,
It was almost done, but it caught on fire, so I've got to start over.
So at this point, I noticed Wolfbeard trying to osmosis his way into the circle of my friends.
I'm so excited to take a picture with the band and with you too.
All the while, everybody in the group was eyeing me uncomfortably. So I spoke up before he could cement his position.
Sorry, Wolfbeard. Valor and I just want a photo of just the two of us since we're in costume. Also, you shouldn't cut in line. People have been here for almost an hour waiting, and it wouldn't really be fair.
He looked wounded by my words, and doubly so when he saw Valor and our new friends nodding in agreement. Perhaps the biggest blow, however, was that the two of our new friends, they were tall and rather cute twin boys, and they were dressed as matching robots. He was probably thinking,
Once again, those stupid robot overlords are robbing me of what's rightfully mine.
Dejectedly, he dropped his head and slunk to the back of the line. For the next 30 minutes, while we waited for them to let us in, I could feel an intense set of eyes sinking into the back of the line. The few times I dared to steal a glance, I spotted Wolfbeard staring, almost unblinkingly and intensely at me. Sensing my apparent distress, the twins kindly offered to let Valor and I go ahead of them in line. They stood shoulder to shoulder, thus blocking us from view. From there, we got a brief reprieve. We had our meet and greet in peace, and we hit it off with the band as well. They took 3 different pictures with us, instead of just one that the ticket was supposed to cover. They even complimented the handiwork of my costume, which just tickled me pink. They were all really sweet and genuine people. It just made me like the group all the much more. It wasn't until Valor and I were on our way out to our seats that we spotted Wolfbeard making his way up to his meet and greet. He locked eyes with us, and then he did this stupid strut thing to the stage. I imagine he thought it made him look like a rock star. Valor and I could have fled, but the morbid curiosity left us glued in place. And boy did he give us a show. To this day, I still feel so bad for David, the man who plays the spine. If by happen chance you ever read this, please know that I am in no way affiliated with Wolfbeard, and I apologize sincerely for how he treated you. You see, the first thing that Wolfbeard does upon reaching the band, he heads straight for the spine. He ignored the hand that he had stretched out for a friendly shake, but instead, he enveloped him in a crushing hug I know, and dread oh so well. After that, his assault still was not finished. He proceeded to rub his greasy hands all over the poor man's abdominal region, and in the creepiest voice, he made an overly sexual sounding
Oh,
moan. He then loudly announced,
you must have titanium under there.
and he cackled wildly at his perceived cleverness. Even through the intense theatrical robot makeup, you could read true fear on Spine's face. It was in his eyes, despite the shaky smile he managed to keep on his lips. The whole ordeal was painful to watch. When it came time to take a photo, he then looped his sweaty arm over Spine's shoulder, forcing him to smell the unimaginable horrors of his pits. And he proceeded to pull him close. He did another one of those moans. Then he stretched out his arm that wasn't around Spine's shoulder and pointed at the camera with a handgun gesture. Valor and I hit our cringe limit, and we had to flee at this point, so that Wolfbeard could not have a chance to catch up with us on the way to the seats. Thank God it was assigned seating. The rest of the night was good, and the concert was fantastic. But I still have pings of uncomfortable secondhand embarrassment when I think back on the meet and greet. The whole thing left me mortified. I couldn't bring myself to go back to Miss Piggy's for a while after that. The thought of having to come face to face with Wolfbeard again was just too much. However, while I was away, our ambitious Robo-Wolf was hard at work scheming. Even after everything at this point, he had still not processed the fact that I wasn't interested, and he had no plans of giving up on me. And since the aggressive sexual comments and mimicking the character I was fond of didn't work, he had one more trick up his sleeve. Now will be the time to pull out all the stops and try his hand at blatant puppet mastering of mutual friends and emotional manipulation. But that's a story I'll have to get into next time. If you enjoyed these stories, please leave a like and subscribe for more. All stories from Reddit and other external sites are linked in the description below. If you have any stories you'd like to share, you can send it to my email at funwithfailure@gmail.com. And for just $1 a month at Patreon, you can get advanced audio broadcast. The link is in the description.